Hey friends, welcome to Embracing Your Season. I'm your host, Paige Cligenpeel. Today, we have a super special show for you. I'm going to answer your questions. I appreciated all of those that contributed to the questions today. Although we won't be able to address all of them, please stay tuned to future episodes when we address all the things that you have questions about. Now, before we get started with this episode, I want to remind you that you can listen to the show on all major podcast platforms. And if you want to watch the video version of the show, check it out on YouTube. Also, if you happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts, I would love for you to leave a review and a rating, because the more that you do, that means the more people can listen to this amazing content. So let's get started on this episode of Embracing Your Season. Okay, friends, let's dig right into your questions today. I'm so excited about this episode. So let's start with the first one that was sent to us. It says, my son seems to reject me and my husband's values, and I feel like he no longer cares about what we think anymore. How should I go about handling this situation? Ooh, okay. Yep. This is the teen years summed up, right? And what's so beautiful is that this is actually a healthy step that your child is taking. They are establishing their autonomy, their own opinions, their own values, like they're questioning things. We want them to be critical about the things around them. Hopefully just not as critical towards us as opposed to the world around them. But there is some value in them questioning why we as their parents believe what we believe and how we act those out in day to day. So again, bottom line, y'all, this is a healthy thing. However, it is also terrifying, might we add. So there is value in the fact that you're asking even this question of, what do we do? How do we move on from this? How do we parent a child that might be moving away from the things that we have raised them to be? In my own life and my own parenting, again, keep in mind, my background is teen therapy. Like, I'm supposed to be this amazing expert in this area. But then I have teens myself and I get into the school system where I previously worked, and my kids are just making choices. Maybe not super frequently, but enough where I'm like, dude, I'm embarrassed by your choices. Why are you doing that? That's not what you've been raised to do. We have to take a step back as parents and realize that, yes, we are modeling and raising our kids. We are hopefully instilling in them and values and character, exposing them to healthy opportunities, helping them grow so they could be wonderful, healthy adults, right? But the bottom line is we cannot control our kids. I know that's a terrifying line. We cannot control our kids. We do everything in our parenting in terms of trying to modify their behavior. But what we truly should be seeking is how to transform their heart. When we transform their heart, that modifies the behavior. Unfortunately, it's a very difficult, laborious journey to help transform their hearts. One of the great books that I love when it comes to parenting is by Paul David Tripp. It's Parenting and the 14 Gospel Principles. It's a phenomenal book. There's so much wisdom in that, but he compares the different styles of parenting from ownership to ambassador. So oftentimes we are taught, whether it's modeled or in this world around us, that we have ownership and control over our kids' behaviors. The reality is we don't. And so that's why we freak out so much when they start becoming autonomous and having their own opinions, especially when it's contrary to our own. Whereas the ambassador role is we are there to represent what good character looks like, represent love and grace and mercy and wisdom. We are modeling that for our kids. We are instilling it in them through our behaviors. So in essence, it hopefully raises them to become similar. We have to separate ourselves from their behavior is a direct representation of our values. When we do that, that kind of separates that idea that we have to be embarrassed about every mistake they make, or especially if their values are contrary to what our values are and they're living those things out. Recognize this is still your child, but you don't also have that huge ability to control who they become. You can influence, but you can't control it. So how do you work this out in day to day with your teen who now is telling you that they don't value the same things that you do? First off, don't freak out. I think that's the number one thing. Don't freak out. And don't rein in the control. That's our initial reaction, right? Whenever our kids start acting out, we try to modify their behavior by adding in more restrictions, more consequences. This will honestly lead to more rebellion. So be mindful of that. When you start adding more and more consequence and they start becoming more and more irritable and rebellious, that is the consequence of your behavior change for them. Here's what you can do instead. Lean into asking questions. Ask them about their values. Ask them about their opinions. What an amazing way to learn more about your kiddo and what is influencing them by being just curious. And I'm not talking about just asking them questions in a judgmental tone. I mean, we all have those tones, right? Where we're trying to lead them to that place where we want them to see that they are wrong. When we do that, we shut down the relationship. They're not going to want to talk to us. You don't want to talk to someone that you feel is judgmental and critical of your opinion. Respect your teens in the same way. Instead, ask curious questions. Allow them to know that you want to know about their values and where they're coming from. When we have this curiosity in this relationship, there's this essence of respect that creates more of a dialogue. And once you start building that, and this is going to take some time, it's not going to happen immediately because your kids know that they are counter to your values. So they're going to be on the defense anytime that you ask questions. The more that you allow time to speak into your questions that you have, the more that they're going to start lowering those walls and trusting you in a deeper, more fulfilled way so that you can ask more and more questions, lean in, even have dialogue. How cool would it be to get to the point where every time that you have these conversations, you're having a dialogue, even if it's counter opinions. There's no fighting. There's no necessarily tension, but it's more of getting to know each other's worldview and perspective. It's beautiful. So one of the things that I really think is super important to keep in mind is your teen is soon to become a young adult, which means that they will ultimately leave your home. And at that point, they may not want to come back if they know entering your home is tense because the way their lifestyle is compared to yours is going to create a natural division in your relationship. And so that is why it's so powerful while you still have them in the home of just showing them grace, being curious about who they are, and asking them questions in a non-judgmental way. This builds a sustaining relationship that will make your kids want to come back on spring break and summer breaks and Christmas breaks because they want that relationship with you. They want to honor you. And that leads to the next point is that while they're in your home, I think it is important that you continue to tell them that you honor and respect their opinions. However, respect is not the same thing as affirmation, right? I think we sometimes, especially in world culture, we confuse the two, that we have to affirm, that we have to agree with everyone's opinions. No, we certainly don't. Let's model this in a healthy way. I can still respect that you have a differing opinion, even when it's about something that is so valuable to you. And it makes you nervous that your kids are different than that. We can still respect where they're at. But it means that your kid still needs to respect your home values. So if you have a certain value that implies certain behavior or reactions in your home, asking your child to abide by those out of respect for you, not again to pivot or revert back to your values, but more of just saying, hey, you're in my home. Can you just make sure that you abide by these rules? Because that's a way that you can show me respect. I think has such power for them because, again, you're coming to them as another individual that has autonomy, that it's their own person, but asking them to respect you enough to say, but this is my home. This is where I raise my family. And I just want you to honor my mother and your father in such a way that your behavior is implicit of that. So again, keep in mind, your kiddos will not be in your home forever, and we want them to come back. We want them to have relationships with us. So that means that we need to respect who they're becoming to be. But be patient, be prayerful, and be respectful. And I promise you, something beautiful will happen in your relationship with your kid. And you know what? They may never come back and have the same values that you do. And that's going to be heartbreaking in some ways. But also you have a relationship with them. And so there's always hope. When you have a relationship, there's always hope. So keep that in mind. Let's move on to the next question. This one is from a listener that has 2 preschoolers and 1 elementary age child. She says, we have iPads for games and watch TV for a special treat, or when I do work around the house, or when we need to unwind. What do you think are good boundaries around screen time? Ooh, such a good question. And there's so many opinions out there. I mean, depending on where you're at on the spectrum, that's kind of the way it is. We have people that are all about it and have some people are like, I will never have a device in my home. In fact, when my kids were little, may I just confess this, that when we got a minivan and we had a TV in the minivan, my husband and I were like, we're only going to allow them to watch TV when we're on long vacations, right? Let me tell you what happens when you get in those moments and you have no energy to break up sibling fighting. Your brain is on fire and you're just like, I just need a McDonald's Coca-Cola because I cannot handle my life right now. Like, that's where you're at. That's when that TV came into play. So I am here to say, I can confess that I have used TV in the car, probably in my own home, to help myself reset and have a distraction for my kiddos. So it is kind of funny how we use technology in such a way. And I don't think in itself is a bad thing. I do believe that there is some value in games and video content, especially for preschoolers. They have such cool stuff now. My kids are missing out. I don't think they're as intelligent as the kids that are coming up because they don't have all the cool things that they used to have. I think back to when I was growing up, for instance, I had Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers. My kids had Dora and Yo Gabba Gabba. I mean, has anybody seen Yo Gabba Gabba? Can we take a second and talk about that first? I mean, go on YouTube if you haven't. Yo Gabba Gabba taught me to not bite my friends. Yep. There is literally a song that says, don't bite your friends. The life lessons we have learned from this show. It's just valuable, right? So there are good stuff out there when it comes to some of the content. But with all things, exposure needs to be in moderation. I mean, all things, but particularly with technology. So ask yourself, why are you using these devices with your kids? What is the intention behind having the iPad out or the video game or the TV, right? Is it because you're allowing yourself to clean dishes or take a shower? Absolutely, girl. Put on Miss Rachel and Bluey. Like, whatever you got to do to make sure that you have a few minutes to yourself. I absolutely get that. But if we're using technology because we're so fatigued from our workload as a parent and all our other roles, then maybe it's time to reconsider not only why are we using technology, but where we need refreshment for ourselves and our body and mind, and not using technology as a babysitter or a distraction for our kids. Now, I know that research is saying that doctors suggest that if your child is from 2 years old to 5 years old, they should only have 1 hour a day. And older kids can have upwards to 2 hours a day, right? But here's the thing. This is what I'm passionate about in educating my clients and youth groups across the board is why do we make this recommendation that technology can have a negative impact on our bodies, minds, and relationships? Well, the first one is because it creates a stimulus cycle in our brains. So in other words, you think about constant stimulus that happens from TV, even music, the lighting, the way that the TV or the game changes instantaneously, that actually tricks our brains into following that speed of information. When it does that frequently enough, our brain needs that level and intensity of stimulation to stay focused. So now we're asking these kids, well, school-age kids, after spending all this time on technology, to go and listen to their teacher or just lecture them. And I know there's amazing teachers out there that do more of the hands-on stuff, which is, so fundamental for kids learning, which is awesome because they're learning. Kids can't just sit still and be lectured to because their brains are overstimulated and then constantly looking for the additional stimulation. So in essence, the way to simplify this is we're all becoming more ADD. We need the constant stimulus in order to stay focused. That is an aspect of what technology is doing to our brains, and especially those developing brains. Another thing is technology is taking away our growth and problem solving. It creates this instant gratification and it reduces our tolerance to stress. So have you ever noticed that after you've given your child a device to play on for a little bit and then you take it away, it makes them irritable because all of a sudden this stimulus, this instant gratification is immediately taken away. So now it's lowering their ability to deal with that stressor. That transition from one thing to another becomes harder because their brain has gotten so used to this desire to be filled and to be gratified. So the next one, and this one is the one that honestly scares me the most. Technology is teaching us to objectify our fellow human beings. I mean, think about it. Technology in the last however many, like 2 decades, maybe. I think the iPhone came out in 2006. Who says 2006, by the way? 2006. And because of that, we've seen a systemic change in social relationships, the way that we respect one another. And I believe technology plays a big part of that because now people that are on our screens, on our TVs, they're objects to us. We have lost our empathy for them as human beings. And we see this more and more in today's interactions, whether it's on the news or even on social media, anything across the board that has to do with relational interactions, and there's conflict there, the way that we treat one another is just, it's awful. It's deplorable. And I believe that technology is a part of that as well. Now, to say that technology at itself is all bad, no, that's not what I'm saying. There are really some great things that are out there, whether it's educational, relational. I mean, there's even some spiritual aspects of finding information across the board that we can grow and learn and gain wisdom from. However, we as parents, we as human beings need to be mindful of our frequency, our content that we expose ourselves to and our kids to. And then give ourselves grace for those days where our kids are going to have to be in front of the TV or the iPad more because we are just not in a place where we can clean the house or take a shower or do a load of laundry. Like, give yourself grace for that. But for those days that you know that you are just over relying on technology, take a step back and realize this isn't good for my kiddo. And I need to find other ways to help my kid be distracted while I do something else, or whatever it is your reason behind using technology. So the question is, what are good boundaries? I would say just be mindful of your exposure. Set up timers. I love the physical aspect of timers because put on like your microwave or your oven so that everyone around you can hear that timer. So that's a natural break in what that child is experiencing, and you're aware and they're aware, so the transition can happen. There probably still going to be some irritability, and that's okay. You work through that. But that natural break, I think, is really important to make it a very obvious thing for them to separate themselves. And then just be mindful of your own exposure and how that's impacting yourself. If your kiddos see that you're scrolling on your phone all the time, well, then they're going to wonder, well, first off, why can't I do that? And why is it so enthralling that my parent can't even look at me because they're on their phone the whole time? That's a statement about their value and worth to them. So just be mindful what you're doing. But take it a day at a time and give yourself grace when you are in the car and you can't handle the noise and you have to turn on the TV in the car so your kids are quiet and you can have a mini break. I love that for you. All right, next question. My 5th grader is begging me for social media. She says she is the only one that doesn't have it, and people make fun of her for not having it. I've just heard awful things about social media, and I don't want her to be hurt by it. However, I also don't want her to be made fun of. So what should I do? Oh, this struggle is real. Like, this is the hardest part as being a parent, is that there's this conflict or this tension of wanting your child to fit in. You want them to have friends. You want them to be well-adjusted. I mean, frankly, we probably want them to be popular to a degree. Like, we want them to be wanted by a social circle. But we also want to protect them from potential harm. So here's some things to consider. And even just seek some clarity from your daughter in this case. I would say ask her a little bit more about why she wants social media. I love just leaning into those questions. And this could be such a fun opportunity to go on a coffee date or go out to a restaurant. Make it like a fun interaction to truly make her feel like you want to know what her opinion is on this and how you can partner with her to maybe compromise or to walk through this season where she's wanting something that you don't necessarily feel like you want to give her. So dig deeper. See why she's into this. I think one of the main reasons why kids feel this way, and this isn't just with technology, I mean, this has been across the board, any social interaction, whether it's like you don't have the same clothes as kids, your hairstyle is different, or you're not hanging out with the same kids that the popular kids are. It's all about FOMO. This is I think this word is still used. I need to check in with my kids if they still use this word, but it means fear of missing out. Anybody else relate to that? I know that I have that. When there's a closed door, especially at my work, because I work with some amazing people, and there's a closed door and I know it's a business meeting, but I'm like, oh, they're having fun. I want to go in there. I want to have fun. It makes me feel this tension of but I wasn't invited, even though, again, it's not my role. I don't even be in that conversation. But that FOMO, it's real, and it is a real motivator for our kids particularly because it makes them want to be involved in things that maybe isn't good for them. But because this drive to be a part of these scenarios or social cliques is so real and deep, it makes them feel like they're missing out in a way that creates fear. It makes them feel like they're not fitting in, maybe not even worthy to have certain friendships. So it could spiral pretty quickly. And that's why I think just leaning in with them and asking them those questions of what is the why behind their desire is going to be super important for you to help figure out how can you partner with your kiddo in this way. So if it is a case that she wants to maintain friendships, I know that was the line that my girls gave me when they were in middle school and they wanted social media. Everybody's on there. I'm missing out. I'm not able to hang out with them because they're only talking on Instagram or Snapchat. So we discussed what other ways are you connecting with friends, not using social media. So for instance, you're still going over to sleepovers. You're still getting text messages. You're still eating with your friends at school lunches and after school activities. Knowing that they probably are missing out on some of those nuanced conversations that are happening in group chats here and there. But overall, you're wanting to expose to your child that you're not missing out on a whole lot. In fact, they're probably actually saving themselves from drama that they don't need to be a part of. But again, we want them to arrive at that conclusion instead of forcing it onto them. Asking them, how are they already connecting with their friends? If they still feel like they are disconnected from that friendship, maybe they need to dig into what is a real friend to begin with. What a beautiful time to have a conversation about what real friends look like. Again, our kids, which is such a sad thing, would rather be in a toxic friendship than be alone. That is a motivator for them to maintain unhealthy relationships because the fear of being alone and outcast is so real to them, and it's close to being like death. It's social death, and they don't want anything to do with it. And so we have to talk to our kids about what is real friendship and the risk of only having maybe one dear friend compared to being in a group of people that don't truly care about you is so valuable compared to being in a toxic situation where that impacts your value and your worth and your identity as a whole. So if they can't come up with what true friendship looks like, ask them if they're willing to allow you to speak into what true friends look like. Hopefully you're modeling this. Hopefully you have good friends that they can see and you can bring examples about. And even sharing some of the times that maybe you made wrong choices with friends, that it wasn't a great friendship. And these are the ways that you started walking away from that friendship, knowing that maybe you deserved a little bit better and there was something else out there for you. So I think another important aspect of this is telling your kiddos that they're not always going to fit in. What a great time to explain to them they don't always want to fit in. We are surrounded by a world that has values and characters that we don't want necessarily to emulate. But for our kids, they don't necessarily see that at this age. And so we get that opportunity to express to them that we're not always going to want to fit in, because when we do, we're actually going away from the values that we as a family hold, or if you are a Christian, that Christians hold, and we don't necessarily want to abide by those things. So teaching them how to distinguish fitting in and being true to yourself. Even coming up with examples of how can you stand firm on your convictions without causing such a huge conflict in your friend group? Or how can you say no to a friend to something that you know is unhealthy for you, but still feel empowered to do so? Man, these are great conversations to even start in elementary age, because when they get to high school and they're finally faced with some of these real life situations, they're going to have a script that you prepared them for way back in the day, and then they can hopefully implement it. So we definitely don't want to always fit in, but I have empathy for those kids that really want to. So helping them lean into that, I think, is another important talk as well. Then I think you can finally conclude with why you are reluctant to allow your child to have social media. I don't think we need to go all in. It's like, it's all bad and I have only heard bad things, because then they're going to not listen to you. Frankly, they're going to put in the Charlie Brown teacher ears. Whoa, that's probably a reference well beyond your years. I'm not going to listen to you because you are completely counter to where I stand on my opinion of social media. That's where kids get, right? Like, they tune out because they feel like you're not going to be an advocate for them. Instead, you can talk about, well, this is what I've heard. Can you tell me how social media maybe isn't like that, or how you have seen it is like that? And then if you come to a conclusion that, okay, so social media has a tendency to make me want to dress a certain way, act a certain way, what are some ways that you can prevent your heart from going to that place? What are some ways that you can build yourself up so that you don't go in that direction? Providing some of that content now, so that when you decide that she can, or your child can have social media, she's already prepared to experience some of those things, and then maybe hopefully come to you and talk about some of the pressures that she's under. But talking about your why and the reluctance, I think, can give her an idea, and hopefully take on to herself that this isn't just a beautiful thing that everyone's telling me about. There's actually some danger in this as well, and I need to be aware of that. I think when the time finally comes for you and your child to allow social media, technology to enter your relationship, I think is really important to establish boundaries from the very beginning. And I'm talking like pretty structured boundaries about screen time. Who do I allow to be my friends, my friend requests? How am I going to talk to people? What am I not going to do? What am I not going to view? All of those things are super important. And if you need to be very concrete in the beginning as well. Keep in mind that when we give generalities, our brains, or our kids' brains, aren't fully developed in that area. So they can't hear those generalities. They need very concrete things so that they can understand what you mean. And then talk through what could be some consequences. Allow them to speak into that as well. Consequences are a good idea to invite your kids in, because again, we want structure for them, but we want this to be a learning experience, not just punishment, but we want them to learn from this. So set up the time restrictions, tell them who they can and can't talk to and be friends with, all of that. And then I think it's important to partner with them once you give them the device. I always tell my kids, I was like, this is a privilege. This is a responsibility. This device is not your own. Your social media is not your own. I know it feels like it's private, but it's not. I am your partner, and it's not that I'm wanting to read everything that you talk about. Lord knows I don't have time for that, nor do I care about all the drama that happens behind the scenes. But I do want them to know that they're not alone in navigating some of these social relationships that they're having online, because they do have real consequences in the real world. So it's that balance of, I'm not going to snoop all the time, but be aware that I'm going to have full access to this. And if you don't want me hearing it, if you don't want me seeing it, then maybe you need to reconsider why you're sending it or why you're saying it to begin with. I love using the filters, or Apple has screen time that you could put some of those restrictions on as well. There's even applications that you can add to your computer and to the phones, like Bark is another really good one as well. Research some of that stuff. Tell your child that you're aware that this might be uncomfortable, but again, this phone is not really theirs. Their conversations isn't done in isolation. this has impacts and you want to partner with them. One of the greatest quotes that changed, frankly, my parenting is from the book Grace-Based Parenting by Dr. Tim Kimmel. It says, you can't teach your kids to swim on the living room floor. I'm going to say that again because that's a mic drop, friends. You can't teach your kids to swim on the living room floor. Think about that. The way that we try to hide our kids and prevent our kids from experiencing the dangerous world around them is further handicapping them from entering the world to be a healthy adult. So that doesn't mean that we just give them free rein with things like technology and relationships and whatever else. No, it means that we partner with them to experience those things so that we can come alongside them, allowing them to make mistakes. Failure is absolutely a part of growing. Be mindful. Don't allow them to fail and then you take away the consequences. They need to learn from that. But instead, walk with them, encourage them, help them see some things that maybe they can't quite see. But it's a relational dialogue that you're doing. And it's done in your relationship as your parent. So again, don't just throw it all in and say, here's a device. Instead, have a plan, have some conversations. And I think there's going to be a lot of power in that as well. Okay, finally, last question. Gosh, this is from a mama who seems kind of overwhelmed right now. She says, I have one preschooler and an infant. I feel overwhelmed and on edge all the time. I find myself getting so frustrated with my kids and husband, even yelling at them over stupid things. I love my husband and kids so much, but I don't like who I am right now. How can I be better? Ooh, well, girl, I see your heart in this, and I want you to know that I see how overwhelming this season could be because I have been through that. I remember there was a season where I had 4 kids under 7. I honestly have blacked out a lot of that season because it was so overwhelming. Just the constant stimulus of having littles. And the thing is, we love our babies so much. I love being their mama, but that season is hard. It is overwhelming. It is beautiful, but it can also be a burden in some ways. And so be mindful that this is just a season. Try to find beauty in the moments that you can. But here are a couple things that you can do that can hopefully bring some more refreshment to your spirit and to your heart. I would say the first thing is just assess your rhythms. How are you pouring back into yourself? When do you have a break? When do you center your body, your soul, and your mind? I mean, maybe it's just reading or going to Target, getting a facial, walking the dog, like whatever it is for you. When do you get a break or pour in to yourself? If you're finding that your rhythms are lacking in this area, then start just by adding one each week. That's it. Just start by doing one each week. Hopefully it will transition into a daily practice. And they don't have to be huge practices and they don't have to take time and money. Instead, it could be having your husband put the kids to bed early while you take a bath, or watching your favorite show when it's nap time instead of doing laundry. Painting your nails or putting on makeup. Gosh, I just remember times where I would put makeup on after a week of not doing anything. And it was just so life-giving. And that's just makeup. And I'm not saying like a lot. I'm just saying enough that makes me feel like a human being again. And I didn't scare the neighbors with my face. So little things can have a huge refreshing impact on your body and your mind. So just assess. What are you doing? When are you taking a break? Next, communicate with your husband about how you have been feeling. He's probably already picked up on it. Let's be honest. When you start yelling about stupid things, he's going to be like, oh, she's a little irritable right now. But when he knows the why behind that, then he can lean in, then he can help you, then he can support you and be your partner, because that's what marriage is supposed to be. It is a partnership. You may have the role presently as the full-time caregiver or the predominant caregiver in your home, but he is your partner. Those are his babies. Those are his kids. He is not a babysitter. He is your husband and he is your partner. So help him by telling him tangible ways that he can help you and assist you and support you and ultimately love you. When we are vulnerable and share our needs, people that love us will always step up and assist us. And finally, find your community. And I know this seems like it's so hard to do when you literally don't even want to leave the house. Grocery shopping is such a labor that you're just like, I can't talk to anybody right now. But I'm telling you, there is so much life given in communities. Did you know back in ancient days, like I love history, right? And especially like biblical times, which I feel like give us such a good model of how it's supposed to look like in our church, is that families lived together. They shared the burden of family life together. They were never doing it alone. And though today we don't have the same social climate, obviously, that they did back in the day, there are still opportunities to build a community with other families. So find a local MOPS group. Check out your local church for other moms that you can maybe have a play date with. Join a Bible study, go on a walk, go to the playground. The ones that are caged in, by the way, the ones that have fences, man, those are amazing. That way your kids don't run away and you get to just sit there and drink your Starbucks coffee with your friend while your kids play. These are life-giving because you are being poured into by community, by women that understand where you're at and want to support you. So invest in your community and you'll find that it will be life-giving for you and your kids. Now, side note about blowing up. Remember, your tolerance right now is not very high. And I believe that's pretty seasonal. So it will change. It will get better. But in those moments that you feel you're getting ready to blow up, for instance, I want you to take a timeout. Okay, so when we hear that word, we're thinking, okay, that's punishment. No, actually, when timeout is done correctly, it's about separating yourself from a circumstance so that you can regulate your emotions, so that you can deal with whatever circumstance or situation arises in a calm, patient way. This is why we do timeouts with our kids, because we want to teach them that when they separate and they calm down, then they can face the problem as a whole. We have to do that for ourselves. We have to take timeouts as parents also, because ultimately, if we don't, our reaction to them in anger could lead to a lot of hurt and frustrations, and then even more guilt and resentment towards ourselves. Now, if you can't find time to separate, so you don't have the ability to go into your room and take a 5-minute timeout, whatever it is that situation looks like, there are things you can do in that present. I love to tell people about mindfulness practices. These are therapeutic practices that have research base that help people calm themselves in moments so that they can just act in peace and grace and patience. One is 4-7-8 breathing. I love this technique. I do it before any time that I get overwhelmed or nervous. It's where you breathe in 4 beats, you hold your breath for 7 beats, and you exhale for 8 beats. The other aspect of mindfulness is using your senses. What is one thing you can see? What is one thing you can smell? What is one thing you can taste? When you use our senses and when we deep breathe, we actually lower our blood pressure, we decrease our heart rate, and we can think more clearly with our brain. How cool is our bodies, right? The more that you practice this, especially when you're not super heightened, the more it becomes a rhythm for you when you do become angry, so that you can respond in grace and mercy and love. So, overall, Mama, you are not alone, and it won't always be this hard, I promise you that. So continue to do the hard work. Continue to practice the self-care, building your community, and letting your husband come alongside you so that you can love your babies and your husband well. Guys, I have loved answering your questions today. I would love to hear more questions. And as I said, we have additional ones that I want to address in a further episode in the future. So definitely stay tuned to that. For those that have questions that you'd like to send my way, hit me up on my email. It's paigecligenpeel@gmail.com. Again, that's paigecligenpeel@gmail.com. I want to hear from you. I would love to address those. We have a lot of exciting interviews coming up, so be sure to tune in next time for another edition of Embracing Your Season.